This is Pantheon Plus, a podcast where we go beyond tights and flights to explore other genres and movies from the past. Each month we'll have a theme. This month we look back at the Beverly Hills Cop trilogy. Each week we'll pick a movie related to that theme, and we are unfortunately ending things on a negative note with 1994's Beverly Hills Cop 3.
Hello, my name's Axel Foley. I'm looking for...
Hello. Welcome to the Beverly Hills Police Department.
Detective Axel Foley is back.
Trust me on this one, okay?
And he's in for the ride of his life.
To continue this message in English, press 1 pound. For Spanish, press 2 star.
Eddie Murphy, Beverly Hills Cop 3.
For Farsi, press 3 pound.
Rated R. It's on May 25th at theaters everywhere.
My name is Jerome Cuson. You can find me on Twitter at JeromeC1985. You can find additional episodes of this podcast through Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and all of your favorite podcast apps. Through the real world, we strongly encourage you to leave a 4 or 5 star review. So help people discover this show and the great work that the folks at the real world are doing. If you would like to interact with us or send feedback, you can do so by following us on Twitter at Hero Pantheon. My co-host for this week and every week will be Brian DeBrain. He can be found on Twitter at Brian DeBrain. Brian, 7 years after Beverly Hills Cop 2, Eddie Murphy has done a number of movies, including Harlem Nights, a movie that he directed and was a huge bomb. And then he did a number of other movies that did not do very well. So he was in a bit of a slump at this point, and he would not break the slump with Beverly Hills Cop 3. We talked last week about comedy sequels that are not great. Beverly Hills Cop does not fall into that category. Beverly Hills Cop 3, unfortunately, does fall into that category. For the major reason, Brian, this movie is not funny.
Did I laugh at any point? Maybe once or twice. But maybe that's just based on reactions and just Eddie Murphy's face and the way he reacts to stuff, or Judge Reinhold or something. But yeah, this was more of me trying to figure out which parts were Disneyland and which parts were Six Flags Magic Mountain. Because that's basically what it was going down to. And Universal Studios. Because I was like, I don't recall Disneyland having this amazing, backlot kind of thing going on. And you realize, oh, that's Universal Studios. And then I was like, I don't recall Disneyland having this, this merry-go-round type part. And I was like, I think that's Six Flags. So yeah, that was me pretty much the whole movie trying to figure out what was going on. Because, I was just kind of disappointed with the lack of comedy. And there's a reason for that, unfortunately. It's because, like you said, he had a bunch of swings and misses from the last 7-year period from the sequel. And, it wasn't, it wasn't what it's supposed to be. I don't know. It was like a lack of funniness, and he was almost actively trying to not be as funny, but maybe that's because he's matured and the character's grown. I don't know. Maybe that's what he was trying to do, but it didn't pay off well in this movie at all.
That was his logic. In an interview in 1984, Eddie Murphy said just that. He said that this was different from the trilogy's first 2 installments because Axel's more mature, no longer the wisecracking rookie cop, and he said he wanted to be taken seriously as a straight action star like Wesley Snipes and Denzel Washington. And I think that there is something to be said for kind of expanding your horizons and trying to do different things, but if you are doing a franchise that has already been well established at this point, like a Beverly Hills Cop, and people I think have certain expectations for what a Beverly Hills Cop movie, I don't think you can necessarily make these kinds of changes, especially if you are going to say Beverly Hills Cop 3 is going to be more dramatic and Axel Foley is going to be less funny, then you are kind of defeating the purpose of the first 2 movies.
Yeah, I don't understand. I don't know what it was, but there was definitely a contrast of what was going on. It's like he wanted to be an action star, it seemed like, in this movie, because they were definitely going for that vibe, and I was like, what the hell? I don't recall Axel Foley being this heroic to the point where he's going to the Superman level and doing all kinds of crazy shit in acrobatics. And I don't know, the fact that he saves those kids, goes down a rope, and doesn't burn his hands on the fucking rope going down that fucking rope. What?
I mean, Brian, let's face it, that's something you probably see in a ton of action movies, and is probably not even worth mentioning. If we go down that rabbit hole, we have to talk about the plot holes of every Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone vehicle as well.
I'll say this: at least in Die Hard, he got burned with those ropes, right?
But I mean, Die Hard is not a comedy. Die Hard is meant to be a straightforward common man action.
I get you. It was just so frustrating because I was just like, this is not what Beverly Hills Cop is supposed to. I mean, yeah, it does have action, but not over the top action sequences where he's jumping from, ride to ride on that amusement park thing. It was just, it felt out of place, So I don't know. It was just total misfire, and he's not an action star. Eddie Murphy's not an action star, unfortunately, and I think this was kind of his coming to terms with that. Maybe I don't know.
I mean, I think that Eddie Murphy is somebody who, at this point, we kind of lose him for a long amount of time. I mean, because after this, he does your Nutty Professors, your Doctor Doolittles. He plays Donkey in Shrek. I mean, that's where his attention goes to, where he's in these goofy family comedies that undoubtedly are successful. They make money. There's no doubt about that. But I think we lose kind of the essence of what makes Eddie Murphy such a great performer, and that's the ability to improv and the ability to do comedy. And it only really feels like Dolomite Is My Name is where Eddie Murphy was able to recapture that. And I think there are a lot of problems in this movie. You mentioned the action sequences. Part of what makes this such a rough movie to talk about is the fact that John Landis is the director. And we could say a lot of things about John Landis and kind of his comedy legacy, but when his obituary is written, the first line or the first sentence of that is going to be about what happened on the set of the Twilight Zone movie in 1981-82. And basically, he is responsible for three people, including two children, being decapitated. And that is something that significantly hurt his career, and it's not really ever something that he's atoned for or apologized for. So when we talk about this movie, we talk about who the director is, John Landis. That's why John Landis is directing the third Beverly Hills Cop movie, because people really did not want to hire him. And Eddie Murphy had hired him a couple of times previously, or had helped to get him hired on Trading Places and Coming to America. But in this case, this is kind of their final collaboration. And one of the things that John Landis talks about is Landis says that Eddie Murphy worked against the comedy of the film by deliberately not being funny, which is bizarre to me that this could happen in a comedy, but that is exactly true. I can think of no other way of describing it, is that Eddie Murphy kind of refuses to be the Eddie Murphy of the first two movies, and even in an AV Club interview in 2009, Bronson Pinchot claims that Eddie Murphy was really depressed at the time when this movie was being filmed, because Murphy had had a number of star vehicles that had underperformed or just straight up bombed. And I think that you see a lot of that manifest itself on the screen.
Yeah, that's what it felt like, man. It felt really off, and then just looking at his past, couple of years before that, it makes sense, and you can kind of see it in the performance. It's unfortunate, but with the John Landis thing, it's like I like Blues Brothers not as much as most, but have a deep love for American Werewolf in London. So it's unfortunate because when I read that, I was like, well, yeah, it's on, it's his fault. In terms of the atonement thing, I'm not quite sure. I'm so far removed from that because I was born in '88 and I didn't really read that story until I saw the Twilight Zone movie and then got the internet like 2001. You know what I mean? So it's unfortunate. It's gonna curse him for the rest. It's one of those things that are gonna curse him for the rest of his life. It's gonna haunt him. So yeah, it's unfortunate that his career kind of reflected that. I mean, it's if he had a great directing performance in some of these other movies, in like the '90s, then maybe. But I don't know. It just his career kind of took this downturn. Maybe it's just kind of the talent just kind of went away, and I don't know. It's unfortunate, but at least they tried here. But they definitely tried. He tried to do the comedy aspects that because Eddie Murphy was lacking, and he tried with other aspects, but it just didn't work because you could tell they were trying to also do some like weird physical kind of comedy and like some weird stuff at the end with the the fog and the mist and all that kind of thing. He was trying, but it didn't work.
For sure. And Eddie Murphy in 2011, when he appeared on the David Letterman show, said that it was not a very good movie, and I think his assertion is correct. And I think another reason that this movie does not work is originally the plot involved Axel Foley, Detective Rosewood, Detective Tagger going to London to rescue Captain Bogomil, who was being held by hostages, or was being held hostage by terrorists during an international police convention. There were numerous problems, including scripting, budget, all that stuff. Everything was dragged out, and John Ashton and Ronnie Cooks had to drop out due to obligations to other pending film projects. And I think especially John Ashton is missed because you miss the banter with the side characters, Rosewood and Taggart, and a lot of the comedy from Judge Reinhold comes from him being the leader of this kind of interdisciplinary police outfit, and a lot of the comedy is him just regurgitating these various acronyms, and it's very goofy and is, again, not at all appropriate to the tone of this movie. It feels like very basic, the kind of comedy I would expect to see out of a 1970s sitcom, not a movie that is made in 1994.
Yeah, I don't get that because there's not that much confusion in terms of the jurisdictions in LA between like Santa Monica and the Valley and Van Nuys and all that stuff that he mentioned. Living here in LA, it's not that confusing, and there's not that many like jurisdiction lines. I don't know where they come up with that bullshit, but that was total like writers' room bullshit. That didn't really know the Valley or Hollywood too well. You know what I mean? I don't know where that came from, but it was weird. And then that scene on the beach, that was fucking terrible. The one with the van, and they wasted like 3 minutes of that, and him calling all the cops and all that bullshit for an empty van. That was like wow, that was cringe. That was total cringe right there. But again, like I said, he was trying to get the comedy out because Eddie Murphy was not doing the comedy for him, and it's unfortunate. So you get scenes like that where it's a total miss and it looks like a shit. That felt like something out of a straight to '90s VHS comedy kind of bullshit kind of comedy skit, or you know what I mean? It's just like it was just totally terribly written, and it kind of reflects the whole movie experience.
So, one of the things that is fascinating about this movie, and there's very little to say about this. Do you know who Alan Young is? Correct, Brian?
Yeah, he's Scrooge McDuck.
So Alan Young, who is the voice of Scrooge McDuck on a number of Disney properties, including the DuckTales TV series of the late 80s and early 90s, he in fact plays the very Walt Disney-like figure Uncle Dave Thornton, who is the owner of the Wonderworld theme park in the film. So you have Alan Young, who is the voice of Scrooge McDuck, playing a Disney-like character. Something going on there, Brian. What do you think?
I don't know what the hell was going on because this is Paramount, and they're playing this line with Disney really tight, and I don't know why. And I'm just like, why don't you just use your own properties? I'm pretty sure you can just like, they probably used one of their Paramount parks as well when they were filming some stuff. But like, I don't know. I just don't know what the hell they were going for. Why even do this plot?
I don't think Paramount has any theme parks. I know Universal does. I know Disney does. I don't think Paramount does, though.
I'm almost sure it's like some Midwestern. I have to look at it because I'm a fan of Roller Coaster Tycoon back in the day. Still am, kind of when I play on my phone. But I used to look up these different like roller coasters and locations, and I could have sworn there was like some Paramount owned theme parks out there. And I don't know why they would just. I don't know why so close to the Disney line because that's playing it so close, and I was just thinking like, does Disney have any production? Any money in this movie? Why are they playing it so close? Because like the entrance looked like Disneyland. I was almost certain of it, but maybe it could be Six Flags again because they definitely use like all the local theme parks and stuff for the all the shots. I'm pretty sure they filmed the wood stuff in the old ET ride. I'm like 75% convinced of that because it just looks like the old ET ride from the forest when you're with ET going above on the bike, right? I don't know. It looked like that. And then that alien ride is the old Universal. It's not old. It's still there, but that's the Universal tram ride where they do the earthquake thing and the water, and it's still the water coming down the stairs, even in 1994. I just went there 3 years ago, and they still have the water coming down that same stairs. So I was just like, okay, you got Universal and all these different theme parks. I don't know, man. It was weird. And then all these generic characters, and then they named a Axel character after him, and they couldn't. I don't know. I don't know. It was weird.
Yeah, a lot of weird stuff going on throughout this movie, quite frankly. And I guess the one good thing about it is Eddie Murphy, Axel Foley, he has a romantic partner in Teresa Randall. That's good, right? Playing Janice.
Yeah, she was. We reviewed her in Spawn, and I think there's another movie I can't think of that she was also in around this time. Was she in Bad Boys? Is she the wife in Bad Boys?
She was in Bad Boys. She was in Bad Boys 2. And if you look closely, she was in Bad Boys for Life as well.
For life, yeah. That's why I recognize her because when I saw her in Bad Boys, even 2 and 3, like, damn, she ages fucking well. Because even in this movie, she looks still pretty good, and then in Bad Boys 3, for that moment in time, still look pretty good, man. So I'm just saying, like, she's got something in the genes that makes her still look young. So credit to her on that.
Well, that is a good thing. I did like the opening action scene. I think that it is extremely well done. And again, we could say a lot of terrible things about John Landis, and I'm certainly not a fan of his. Perhaps the worst thing he has done, Brian, is spawn Max Landis.
Yeah, perhaps. And I didn't eat any of that pizza from PWG. I swear, I didn't eat any of it.
We very much appreciate that. It is a little bit emotional as well as Inspector Todd is killed at the beginning of this movie, and of course there has to be a connection to Beverly Hills because we have to get Axel Foley there. So it is unfortunate because I think you see that the relationship has improved. Todd is still kind of a pain in the ass to Axel Foley, but I think you see some growth there, and of course the only reason that they have that level of growth is so that they can kill Inspector Todd, and it means something at the funeral for Axel Foley to be there. But I did want to point that out because Inspector Todd has been an important part of these three movies, and some of the best scenes from these movies have involved Inspector Todd and Axel Foley.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised when he put his head down as soon as he passed. I was like, oh, that's a good little subtle moment for Axel Foley. You know what I mean? Dramatic. Didn't expect that. But then I guess it becomes this whole dramatic turn for the whole movie, right? And then it's a little too much dramatic from too much drama from Eddie Murphy from that end. But yeah, that beginning was really good because I don't know if you picked up on it, but the whole no SWAT thing I thought was pretty interesting, considering that he knew the level of criminal, right? Because he knows like these are just mechanics, they're just chop shop guys, they're not like they're not gonna have all these guns, right? It just so happened that they were getting ripped off by these these Wonderland people at the same time who happened to have a bunch of guns. It was just unfortunate that way, but he knew. I would agree, like, yeah, no SWAT, even though his, this boss was like, why the fuck do you get SWAT over here? I would call SWAT to a bingo in church, which I thought was a great line. But yeah, I thought that was a good little subtle thing. I don't know if you picked on it, but I like that a lot. And then the fact that he was still like fuck SWAT at the end. Because I think, yeah, I mean, if everything was according to plan and everything was just those chop shop guys and they were just having fun, and I like the beginning where they're singing, I think it's Gladys. I think that was Gladys Knight in the Pips. Come see about me. If I'm wrong on that, I'll correct myself. But the way those fat dudes were dancing, that was funny. That's kind of that Blues Brothers ish kind of feel. You know what I mean? But yeah, the beginning was good. It's just everything after that. You know what I mean? And then the villain. I guess we could talk about him later, but I don't know. The villain was kind of generic.
The villain was so annoying. I absolutely hated the villain, and everything about this plot was just so nonsensical. And again, a lot of this is going to be a few minutes of negativity here because the villain is really really bad, and it's really hard to describe just the ways in which he was so bad because there's nothing there. There is nothing interesting. He is just a foil. There is no character development, no pathos involved whatsoever. And it's really hard to get into and invest in a movie like this when they are just so obsessed with the idea of we're gonna have this villain, we're not gonna give him anything to do, and he's just gonna be evil, and he's just gonna be annoying, and that's it.
Yeah, and then there's no actual reason to kill those mechanics at the beginning. There's no actual reason to kill the police chief from Detroit. Like, there's no actual reason to kill any of these people. And then also you've got the dad from the Nightmare on Elm Street, who we'll actually talk about later in November because he's actually one of the stars of a movie we're going to review with Bruce Lee. Wink, wink. That's a hint. But yeah, it was just a weird casting. It was a contrast, total contrast from the first two movies. like we mentioned in last week's podcast, man, they did a great job casting the villains. In this case, total opposite. Like, total, I don't know, man. They went too generic. You know what I mean? And then also, I mentioned 2 weeks ago that trope about, finding the drugs, and the good cop finds the drugs, and then he brings the police over, and then they find it, and then it was like, wait a minute. Usually they set him up, and then, it's a fake, and then they trick the good cop into making him look like he's crazy. Well, guess what? The trope is in this movie, because they did the exact thing that I was thinking with the coffee and the cocaine in the first one. They did it here with the fake currency, because halfway through the movie, Axel catches him with the fake currency printer, whatever. Oh, they're printing fake money. That's where the feds are after him. Blah blah blah. Then they brings the Fed over, who's in on it anyway, and he sees it's like, oh, now they're just printing a regular, quote unquote fake money for the park or whatever. And then it makes Axel look like he's crazy. There's the fucking trope right there that I was talking about. So I was like screaming at myself, like, that's the trope. They did the trope, and it didn't work because it's a shitty movie. So I don't know. I guess if it finally came to him that trope, and it's still going on today, where halfway through the movie they make the good cop look like he's crazy, even though he's got all this evidence that hasn't been appeared or hasn't shed light on yet. So they did that.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty weird. We also have Rosewood in a position of authority, which I understand why they did it, because Taggart's not around. There's no Bogomil, so you got to have someone in a position of authority. You also have John Flint, quote unquote, replacing Taggart. And part of what makes this so gross is I wonder if they specifically cast Hector Espinoza because he kind of resembles John Ashton, but he has none of the chemistry with Eddie Murphy, and all he is he's a wet blanket for the whole movie against Axel, and it's not funny. Like, it does not work. It basically returns us to the first half hour of the first movie, and it did.
Yeah. This happened in Rush Hour 3 as well. The same thing, where Rush Hour 3 just completely recycled the first movie. And they did it here too, and to a certain extent. They just kind of rehashed some of those original, like, dynamics, like you just said, with the first half hour of the first movie. So it's just, I don't know, man. Because of the timing and everything, the lightning couldn't strike for this movie. You know what I mean? It just, nothing lined up well. Especially with this casting, man. I mean, he's a good actor. You know what I mean? He's a great actor at times. He's done a lot of those character actor roles and stuff in the last 30, 40 years, you know what I mean? And it's unfortunate because he was just not in his element in this movie at all. They were trying to make him be funny, and he wasn't funny. Maybe he had one or two okay lines, but it just didn't fit, because you were just immediately, as soon as you said, Taggart told me a lot about you, and I was like, okay, he's the replacement, and they couldn't get the other guy, and, blah, blah, blah. So it just kind of hindered it for me. So it's unfortunate, and it doesn't work at all.
No, it certainly doesn't, and that's really about all I have to say about this movie. I don't even want to give MVP and best performance. I mean, I guess if I had to, I would say John Landis for MVP and Eddie Murphy for best performance. But I mean, I don't really feel good about giving awards out, because this movie is just so painfully mediocre. I don't think it's necessarily completely bad, because I think it's competently directed, but it's when a comedy isn't funny, there is no more excruciating feeling, because I feel like if an action movie is bad, I think there's still some elements of it that you can enjoy. Maybe it's kind of fun bad at a certain point, but my goodness, if a comedy is bad, it just doesn't.
Yeah, it's just bad all around. And like, I forgot to mention the jacket last week, but Eddie Murphy's wearing this jacket, this Letterman varsity jacket, and I think they put it on him to make him look bigger, because it makes his shoulders look bigger, even though they're clearly not, based on the first movie. So I think they did that just to add some, like, subtle visual size to him, and they try to do it in this movie again, and it just doesn't work either. I mean, it works kind of in the second one, but in this one it just doesn't work, because he's trying to do that action hero gimmick, and it doesn't click. And that's the other thing too, is that they try to make him this action hero, like we said, with that stupid stunt that he does, and then going down the rope and not burning his hands, and that annoying the shit out of me. But all these other things, and then the shootout at the end was a completely different type of shootout than the first one. Like, the second one had that Tony Scott action that had a kind of a rhythm to it and style. This doesn't have that at all. I don't know if that's just not up John Landis' alley. Like, his style is more of maybe like slow burn, like with American Werewolf in London, and teases and stuff like that. and maybe like musical sequences because clearly he loves the Blues Brothers, and then that musical sequence at the beginning of this movie. So that might be one of the few things that work is that opening sequence with the two fat dudes. But yeah,
Oh my god, I completely tried to watch that scene from my memory, and I knew the movie was going to be bad from that moment. When you generally, if you watch a bad movie, you can tell in the first 2 minutes it's going to be bad, and that was the signal right there.
memorable for me because I really like that song, and I don't know, at least it was putting a smile on my face for that minute. So is what it is, and there's not many smiles in this movie. It's just kind of unfortunate, but I would say this, like this is kind of this transitional point to where, like I said before, I really like the late '90s Eddie Murphy, so I think he was on his way to that, obviously. But maybe you kind of need a movie like this to kind of shake you up a bit, kind of relook at things and kind of reshape things in your career, and that's where he kind of went because I love Life and I love Bowfinger, so he was on that trajectory, even though he was doing that family stuff in between. I mean, you could still, I mean, Nutty Professor, he did a hell of a job doing 7 performances or whatever it was. So it's not like this movie kind of killed his career. Obviously, it's just it was a wake up call, I think.
Perhaps so. Well, Brian, this will conclude Beverly Hills Cop month, and we're going to be doing a little bit something different for the rest of the year. Is Brian and I, we're going to take turns having different themes for each month. Brian is going to have the months of September and November. I will have the months of October and December. And we're going to pick a theme. We're going to pick 4 movies related to that specific theme. I decided to let Brian go first because I was kind of the one that spearheaded what we were doing over the summer. So I wanted to let him have the first theme of these first 4 months. And Brian, why don't you tell us the theme and the movies that we will be discussing next month in the month of September?
It's strange because the theme is sort of relevant now. The theme is a road trip. Going on a road trip. Originally, I just wanted an excuse to watch Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And then I also thought, well, this will give me another excuse to finally watch Midnight Run. 2 movies I've never seen before. Again, we mentioned Martin Brest. Midnight Run went on, or is directed by Martin Brest. It was the movie he did after Beverly Hills Cop, like 4 years later. Highly acclaimed movie with Robert De Niro in it because I guess he didn't rarely do comedy in that point, and when he did, it was just out of this world hilarious. So that's what I've heard from this movie. So that's why I'm excited to watch it. And then Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, John Hughes. I'm a big John Candy fan. It's unfortunate I haven't seen a lot of his movies, but I love him in Cool Runnings. I love him as Barf in Spaceballs. And that 5-10 minutes he had in Home Alone was tremendous. I thought if he didn't die, man, I thought he could have won an Oscar by the end of the '90s. Like that was, to me, his career was on that level, going on a higher level, especially with Cool Runnings. So this will be a good chance to watch a movie I've never seen before with John Candy, and it's a John Hughes flick. So tie that in together. That'll be the first 2 weeks, and then the next 2 weeks I decided let's kind of have some fun with it. We're having some comedies, so let's watch some comedies we haven't watched in a while. Sticking with that theme. I want I want to do father son kind of stuff that kind of relates. Same year, these 2 movies, Tommy Boy '95, Goofy Movie '95. So it's gonna be fun. We're gonna be using the Disney Plus app. We're gonna be using the HBO Max app. We'll be using all the apps because I think all these movies are online to stream. So it's gonna be fun looking back at all these different comedies. We went through the Beverly Hills trilogy, cop trilogy, with all these, with its comedy stuff going on. So it's a nice transition from all the superhero stuff we've been doing, and it gives us a chance to watch some comedies from the '80s that we've never seen before. So I don't know. I know you haven't seen Midnight Run. I think you've seen Planes, Trains, but it's going to be really interesting considering that it's kind of like a fresh palette for us on some of these newer movies that are from the '80s. So.
So we are going on a road trip. That is the theme for next month, and we will discuss all of the themes as they come up. We also, believe it or not, we have ideas for what we're going to do in the first half of 2021 as well. So this podcast is going to continue as long as Brian and I are able to do it. So we want to thank you so much for your continued support over these summer months, and as we reviewed Lord of the Rings, that trilogy, as well as Planet of the Apes and now Beverly Hills Cop. For Brian, my name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you next week when we go on a road trip.
I haven't seen a $50 bill in like 12 years either.